So everyone, welcome to our Finance Committee for June, looking at the April result. And welcome along to our online members joining us today. Kia ora, Councillor Louise, Deputy Mayor Angela and Maria, Councillor Maria, welcome. We're coming together today at a time of Matariki, the Māori New Year. Matariki is a time for us to reflect and for resilience and renewal. It invites us to look back on the year that's been and to acknowledge the challenges that we've faced, the progress we've made and the lessons that we've learned. It offers us a chance to pause and reset, and boy, it really feels like we need to do that in this season, and to plan wisely for the future and to clarify and a shared purpose. I'd like to take this moment though to thank Mā Ruka and the members of the Te Ahu Whakaita Charitable Trust for all the work that they've done to bring events to us that the whole community can participate in and appreciate and raise the understanding of the Matariki season. So thank you goes out to you, Marlena, and your committee. Kia ora for that. Members, we start our committee with karakia, so kia inoi tātou. Is it up on the board? Miss Ford? Bit slow on that. Do we know it by heart yet? Probably. Tuia e runga, tuia e raro, tuia e roto, tuia e waho. Tuia na kaya mahi o te kaunihira o Kirikiriroa. Whaia ta iti kahurangi. Kia u, kia mau, kia ita. Haumie, huie, tai kie. Wonderful, thank you, that feels good. And to our agenda for today, I see apologies today we have from Councillor McIndoe and Thompson for full absence. Councillor Naidu-Rolfe, who is away in Wellington on council business, representing Mayor Paula to the Refugee Day. We wish her well and hope she's taken a nice woolly coat. And Mayor Paula, who will be here for lateness. We've acknowledged those online. Oh, and I beg your pardon, let's take away that absence to Councillor Thompson. She is, in fact, online. Kia ora, Sarah, and welcome. Are there any other apologies today? I see none. I'm happy to move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Anna. Kia ora, all those in favour? Thank you. Confirmation of the agenda. There's a note there in the blue, if you would, that we're confirming the agenda and taking item 11 directly after item 9. I'll move the confirmation of the agenda, and I saw Councillor Emma's hand up earlier, so as a seconder. All those in favour? Any declarations of interest, councillors? There being none. And we have no public forum today. So we'll move right on to item 5 in that case then, and that is the confirmation of the Finance and Monitoring Committee open minutes for the 29th of April. Are there any matters of correction or adjustment needed on those? No. No, there being none, I'll move, and Councillor Moko to second. All those in favour? Wonderful.
Motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you. Item number 6, and that is our Capital Portfolio Monitoring Report. Can I invite Ian and Kelly to the table to present your report? Thank you, and if you could give us some of the key elements, then I'd be very grateful.
Good morning, Chair Maxine. Good morning, elected members. So, Capital Portfolio Monitoring Report for the 10 months ended April 2025. Look, I think fair to say that over the past 3 months there's been quite a lot of reporting around the revised capital delivery program in terms of how we're monitoring or measuring ourselves against the capital program for the LTP. What I'm pleased to say is that since back in February we started reporting to you that we felt the deferrals were going to be at a level of about 168, 170 million, which would result in a capital program this year of about 206 million. And since that time we've remained constant on that, and through constant reviews of the capital program we are continuing to be confident that that will be our year-end result for this year at 206 mil. And that will mean that we should have a deferral level of about 168.8 million, which is quite a specific number really, but that's what we're expecting to do. You also notice we've tried in the last few iterations of this report to pivot away a little bit from just simply talking about a one-year view of the world, because a one-year view of the world isn't very good when you're looking at a capital program that Council has resolved to consider as a 3-year program. So we're starting to bring a more of a 2 and 3 year view onto the report as well. And you'll see in paragraph 53 of the report we've published a 3-year capital expenditure revised program. This aligns with what councillors would have seen during the 25-26 annual plan deliberation report. So again, just constant data and consistent data coming through, which is really good. I'll just remind councillors, you'll note that the year 1 205.9 or 206, year 2 256.6 net, and year 3 410.9. And if you do recall, that actually is a bit of a drop from what we reported at the April committee meeting, and that was simply again staff going away and having a look at the deliverability of the program and the affordability and revising that going forward by moving money up to year 4 and beyond. And again, that was reflected in that deliberately. That was to be done so we could reflect that in your deliberation report for the annual plan. Look, I'll state the obvious. Look, we're nearly at year end now, even though this is a 10-month report. But look, we won't know the final deferrals or the final savings targets until we reach the end of the financial year. And certainly what we'll do then is once those crystallise and we have that degree of certainty, we'll report those back to you at the 26th of August. Mm-hmm. I got that date wrong before, so thank you for that. The actual result for the 10-month result was, excuse me, I've lost my bit of paper. Was 159.6. So again, that is a 10-month result. We've subsequently had the May result, and we are currently looking at draft June results as we get close to that point in time, and that's why we're confident of achieving that 206 million target without having to come back with a significant deviation from that, or for that matter, any deviation for that. The work in progress, we talk about this at every meeting. Look, at the end of April, 30th of April, our WIP balance was 746.4. I did mention there that when you've got such a significant capital program that Hamilton does, to have a large WIP balance is not unusual and shouldn't be seen as a negative. Again, what we tend to do is focus on what we consider to be our red WIP, which is our work in progress, which relates to assets that are actually in use. Have been commissioned, but we haven't actually completed that capitalisation process, which prevents us from starting that depreciation on them. Having said that, of course, we know now that we've done it for a number of years. Finance take that into account, and they make an allowance for that and ensure that there is the depreciation related to that level of WIP is actually reflected in your financial performance at the time, so there's no surprises coming later. Just did want to focus on what I consider to be some positives in there. Look, we have, for the 10 months, we've capitalised 226.7. I can tell you that we have, at April, we had completed a further 110 million of capital analysis, which has moved through to the next stage of the capital process, which is to load it into our asset management systems. And I think we've heard before that one of the reasons we're having a little bit of a delay there is our asset systems are in a little bit of shutdown at the moment because pending the outcome from the Waters revaluation. So while the analysis has been done, it was just a little bit in a state of hold, waiting to get through that. But the analysis has been done. Recently, as in 3 weeks back, we received the detail for the final capitalisation of the Peacock assets to date, which is the roading network, the pump station, etc., totalling 122. And I can tell you as of yesterday that that's partially been analysed as well and is ready for capitalisation as well. And again, in terms of where we are today, there's a further 60 to 80 million that is near completion. I tell you those numbers simply because they are big numbers. They will add up to a lot. You may not ultimately see them in a reduction in WIP come end of the financial year, but it's just reflecting there is a significant amount of work going on, and that analysis has been done. And once we get that green light, it should flow through the system reasonably quickly and bring that balance down significantly. In terms of project risks, 3 project risks this version, 2 existing, 2 being one being Collins Road, wastewater storage, and I'll just remind that that's an amber. There's been significant groundwater conditions on the site there, and elected members may recall there was a 9T report recently where came up and additional funding was approved for the reprioritisation within that capital program for the wastewater storage tanks. So we'll keep monitoring that. The other one is the Embassy Theatre open space, and clearly that's just ensuring that there's good timing alignment between that work being completed and the opening of the theatre. The new one is our new Waiora water treatment station project, which was the installation of the membranes. Look, that's just moved into a commissioning period, so we're really putting it in an orange status just to let you know that as we just work through that technology and we look at just how that project is actually being used, just to make sure there's no issues there, and we'll come back if anything comes out of the woodwork as we move through that period. We've retained 1 portfolio risk, and it really is around just making you aware that, look, with now that Council's resolved to move forward with the new CCO, that will cause a lot of work. I won't say churn, I won't say uncertainty, but it will just cause a lot of additional pressures on staff and that to deliver, and potentially that could have some impact on the delivery of the capital programs. We make sure that we're doing the right thing and staff are focused in the right areas. I'll conclude with a couple of new items I've included within the report. The first one is, I believe it's a good news story. NZTA with our Eastern Transport Corridor just very recently announced the approval of additional subsidy for that project to the tune of 2.1 million. Which is great news. Unfortunately, by the time we got it, it was unable to be reflected through the annual plan numbers. So this report effectively is saying is that we'll introduce that additional revenue over years 2 and 3. It does come with an uplift in expenditure as well, but the overall benefit is a small surplus, so to speak, but certainly that additional revenue is going to have a beneficial impact on your debt to revenue ratio. The other one is the Rotokauri Greenway PDA. We've talked a lot about this in the past, that this is capital works that effectively are being delivered on behalf of the community, but a little bit unseen through Council's financial reporting, because the PDA effectively is a funding document, and the budgets to make repayment start in year 4. However, look, the accounting rules are quite clear on this. Look, we have to actually reflect the value of the work done to date, even though that money will not be paid until year 4. So I just want to make you aware that what you will start now seeing is the cost of the work coming through, or the value of the work coming through your capital statement. But I just want to reiterate and just ensure you that that's just the accounting measure of the value of the work, and there's actually no money paid out until year 4 to align with the PDA. But what it does do is it gives you a more accurate view of the world in terms of actually what capital works is being delivered on behalf of the community in terms of supporting growth. So I will stop talking because that's probably enough from me. Kelly, did you?
Yet again, Ian, you've knocked it out of the park.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll have you take questions.
Thank you for your report. Questions, councillors? Do I see any? Councillor Bidder.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if this might be more of a question for Chris Allen, if he's here. He's not. He's there. Yep. So the deferral projects.
Chris, if you could come to the front if you're going to be needing to answer. You'll need a microphone.
Yeah. Yes, sure.
Sorry about that,
Yeah.
Councillor Bidder.
That's all right. Yeah. Chris, what I'm looking for is an assurance that the deferred projects aren't going to cause us any problems, and I'll refer to the wastewater tank that we're sort of debating about in Hamilton East for Boys High or Steel Park. My understanding is that that's been deferred sort of every year for about 8 years, and is part of the problem for why Hamilton East has wastewater connection problems. So are you able to assure me that the projects we're deferring now aren't going to cause us significant issues in the near future?
Yeah, look, I think, and I think we've covered this in a previous meeting, I think you can be assured that there is no slowdown of delivery of some of our critical projects. If you look at our program, all of the key projects are being delivered, and you can see from the program sheets that big projects have been delivered. Some of our challenges are in the our programs of work, you know, renewal programs and transport programs, but our key projects we're doing really well on. Good. I don't know where you got that information that the bulk storage has been deferred for 8 years. I don't think that's right. I think since we've put it on the program, our first one was Collins Road as our first bulk storage. Yeah. Even though we've had the water issues, we're back on track, and that's full noise and will be delivered. That's our first one. The other two, which we're progressing, and they're in the planning designation sort of stages, you know, two on the eastern sort of network, and they're going full speed. So the deferrals are not slowing down, but it's just necessary steps to get the planning right, get ready for the designations. They're big projects to designate and put into your community. So, you know, make haste slowly, I guess, to do that really well to set us up for a good outcome. So no pullback on that. We're going as fast as we can on those.
Yeah. Make haste slowly. I like that. And I feel suitably reassured. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. That's all of your questions, Councillor Bidder. Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Chair. Actually, my sort of question was on the Collins Road bulk storage thing. There still seems to be a little bit of uncertainty about the cost, and that can we be assured that it's not going to cost extra, or that it's under control? Or?
That's one of the reasons why we've flagged it as a risk, because we have had an unexpected issue out there, and we're back on track. That's required a reconsenting and a redesign to put in some further equipment, well points to drill. So cost is a real challenge. The best outcome is we'll deliver on budget. The worst outcome is it'll be over budget, but we're just working through those issues at the moment. So there are just contractual issues that we need to work through. So we've decided to flag it, even though it's back on track and being delivered, just as an amber risk, and it's something that we're putting a lot of energy into it at the moment to look at what the final outturn costs will be.
Right, and thanks, Chris. And when it does, when will we know? Like, when, if it's going to cost extra, when will that hit us? When will we hear about that?
Yeah, look, this I probably don't want to say too much in the public space here, but you know, we are like some contractual issues we're working through. We've got some really good contractors on board doing it. There are some genuine contractual issues to deal with the delay and the unexpected conditions. So we're just working through that. So I expect over the next 2 to 3 months we would get clarity on that.
And our hope is that we can do it within budget.
I think that's why we put it amber, because that's at risk. But at the moment, it's a potential outcome to do it in budget. It's also a potential outcome it will be over. So we're, you know, this is one project in a program of work. So we'd be looking at the whole program if we needed additional funding. But we'd come back. It's something that would have to come back to council for to get approval to do that. But we're not at that point just quite yet where we can come back with clarity.
Thank
or
you.
Finality.
Thanks, Chris. And just one more, it may just be slipping out of scope, this last one, but the problems that hit the Collins Road side, was that site specific, or are they something we should be aware of for the other bulk storage?
I'm advised that they're site specific, but I think in the chamber, prior to some question from Councillor Bitter, I think previously, it's something I think will put even more precaution in terms of site investigations on the other one, just to be clear. And I think our consenting strategy probably is a lesson learned to probably have a consent that's a little bit broader to anticipate that things might not be as you expect. So there were some lessons out of that, but in general, my understanding is this was a very site-specific issue that we didn't expect, and we don't expect to see it in the other sites.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Other questions, colleagues? Oh, that looks like an easy report. Couple from me, though, before you go, if you'd indulge me. Just as a backup on that bulk storage questions, that's the first of several projects, as I understand. And are we considering the bulk storage as a whole program? And is there the ability, therefore, then to be able to transfer some of the costs from others into covering the Collins Road?
Yep, I'll pick that up. So we have come back to you on a number of occasions about this program. So you're right, there are two programs. There's capacity increases in the Western network and the Eastern network. So we've got two funded programs. Both of them have multiple sites. So we brought quite a big report to Council sometime during the course of the year to bring you up to date about the strategic thinking and where things would go. Council decided to partition off 3 in the first 5 years and to progress those to consenting, design and delivery. And the other ones, they noted our views on the strategic location of those without just starting the detailed consultation on those. But be assured it's considered as a whole citywide program of works. And the program that we've got is looking at our absolute priorities and doing those ones first.
Thank you. That's helpful. And the second question to you, Ian, with regard to the concern on the CCO for waters. Today, Council's made an announcement on the establishment board, the naming and the chair and the other directors. Does that help to give you confidence that with that establishment board well set to begin the work, that we'll be able to complete as we've asked to do in that program?
Oh, my personal view, yes, I think is every as we get further down the path and that certainty starts to crystallise and staff know where we're going for both organisations, I think, yeah, that certainly goes a long way to help to minimise or to mitigate that risk that we were talking about. It was simply just there as because of the significance of it and the degree of uncertainty around it that it could cause some issues. It was never meant to be to imply there would be issues. It was just really to say we are very conscious of it and we just want to be cognisant of it when we're reporting to you.
Thank you. No other questions from any of our online councillors? No? All right. Thank you for your report. Thanks, Ian and Kelly. Appreciate that. So let's go to the motion, colleagues. It is, in fact, to receive the report, and Andrew will move and Councillor Moko to second, and move into debate. Do you have some debate, Councillor Bitter? No debate? Councillor Moko? No? Well, let me just say a couple of words, actually, because thank you, Ian, for your report. There's always so much in it that it fills my head with all kinds of questions, and usually your report can answer that. So thank you for that. It's really good to see that we'll have some more visibility over the Greenway project that's coming up, and we'll have some time to be able to understand the implications for council around that, but also have the opportunity, I believe, to be able to talk about the real value of that partnership and what that can offer our city, and growth in that northwestern site, unlocking the ability for affordable housing into that area, which is something that we're all waiting for. The other mention there is the Eastern Transport Corridor. Again, another piece of kit to unlock growth in that on the other side of the city, over in the east. Great to be able to see that get the green light, as it were, from NZTA. Awesome to be then thinking about how that starts to get delivered. And then the last thing is a tiny little bit of investment in my own rohi at Wellington Street Beach. Yay, it's been long awaited to be able to see that small bit of community amenity that being developed. That starts there on the 8th of July, just over a week away, and another really great example of small-scale projects making a real difference in our communities. Kia ora, and that's it from me before I get the bell. Anybody else who might want to? No? All good. So all those in favour? Aye. Against?
The motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you. Colleagues, that takes us to item number 7, our financial performance and strategy report, and we'll welcome Sarah up to the table. Kia ora, Sarah, looking very colourful in your winter solstice yellow.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll leave the floor to you, but let me comment already on the really positive numbers that are in our report today. Thank you for the work that you've done around that. Kia ora.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa. First of all, I would just like to acknowledge that there was an error on a couple of numbers in the report. So on page 49 of Diligent, paragraph 26, the text wasn't updated to match the table below, and the accounting surplus in that table is incorrectly stated as 14.1 when it should be 6.4. So I acknowledge those errors in the report. But year to date, the balancing the books result is positively 22.8 million ahead of budget, and but the accounting surplus is 14.1 mil unfavourably, so the opposite way. And our forecast for the end of the year follows similar trends, with the 25.3 million favourable variance for balancing the books and a $6.4 million variance for the $6.4 million unfavourable variance for the accounting surplus. Essentially, the balancing the books number is how much we are better off in terms of cash from an operating perspective, excluding capital revenue considerations. The reduced accounting surplus is mostly driven by that reduced capital revenue and the losses on swaps, which are a reflection of the market drop in interest rates, not an increasing rate of interest being paid. So the critical drivers for the improved balancing the books result, the NZTA funding uncertainty and the future fit vacancies held at the beginning of the year have had some flow-on effects on the impact of and timing of program delivery, and have resulted in some reduced costs for the current year. But on a positive note, some critical contributors to the improved result include 2.3 million operational contribution from the Destinations Group, with increased event activity in the city, $2 million revenue in the waste min, but that must be transferred through to the reserve for future spend in that area. $1.5 million of reduced costs relating to the curbside collection contract, and $2 million of data storage savings as a result of some of the programs that have been implemented by the digital services team. There's also some one-off revenue recognition in the regulatory and safety area from review of revenue in line with the accounting standards. So considering the inflationary environment in which we started the year, this result essentially demonstrates a well-controlled spend for the year. There's always the potential at year-end to unearth year-end adjustments, noting that they're not usually cash adjustments because we've closed the books, we're not paying out any more cash, and they generally fall outside balancing the books. This might include things like provisions around like the landfill provision, which is looking well into the future, or WIP reviews as we finalise those capitalisations. So our debt balances are expected to be 200 million lower than the LTP projections, which is a combination of the reviewed capital program changes in the current year, the actual opening cash balances at the beginning of the year, and the OPEX and CAPEX savings that have been achieved throughout the year. So the onflow of depreciation and interest impacts have been incorporated into the annual plan numbers. We also have our treasury operations have been going well with the bulk drawdown of debt held on term deposit, generating good returns and maintaining a high level of liquidity. So beyond that, I'll assume the report has been read and I'm open to questions.
Very good. Thank you for that. Now, colleagues, I'm looking out to see what questions we have. Councillor Bitter.
Thank you, Chair. Sarah, the graphs on page 54 of Diligent, we have a nice graph on top of the net debt and a not so nice graph below that of balancing the books. What proportion of both the reduction in net debt and the reduction in the projected balancing the books surpluses is due to transferring debt to the water CCO and the water CCO then getting the water's income that
so
would otherwise be rates?
Yes, so there is a reduction in debt in the green graph, shows a reduction in debt as a result of waters going from year 26-27. So I think it's the debt proportion at that point in time is around the 30% mark of our council debt,
Right.
Approximately. And as for the balancing the books side of things, it's proportional because the rates are ascribed in a proportional manner to the cost of the activity.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Any further questions? Councillor, Deputy Mayor Angela.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, Sarah. Thank you for your report. Just a question around a motion, proposal that was accepted that I put through the LTP around the zoo. And that was that when the zoo exceeds its revenue budget up to 20% of that additional revenue be reinvested. The latest staff told me was that they were sort of trying to work out how that would all work. Has that been done, and where will I be able to follow along how that's going? Where will that be reported?
Yeah, we'll evaluate that at year end, and then we'll look at how we then account for that going forward. We do.
Okay, so it'll be a year end.
Yes. Yeah.
Budget line. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
I don't see any further questions, Sarah. Thank you for your report. It's obviously very clear and concise. I'm happy to move, and do I have a seconder? My deputy, Councillor Moko. In terms of debate, yes, and thank you for your report, Sarah. You know, we can clearly see the consequence of decisions that we've been making to tighten the belt and to be mindful of the times, that's really starting to take effect. And, you know, I can see that the CE and the frontline staff, that message is really clear from this committee and from our community that those things have been heard and are now being acted on. And you can see on page 50 that $12.5 million in the cumulative operational savings, coupled with the increase in the revenue, 8.2 million, and 4 of that from the destinations team, heroes that they are. They've obviously been making hay while the sun shone earlier in the year, and that's really paying dividends. But it's also a clear reflection of the organisation-wide focus on efficiency. And so today's strong result is, in our financially constrained environment, shows the ability that we can do more with less and still be able to deliver the kind of city that we're all looking forward to having and enjoy living in. And so, you know, I'm really heartened as we come to the end of the year that the final numbers will reflect what we're seeing a good result of today. So thank you, Sarah, to you and your team. I know the kinds of workload strain that you're under at the moment, delivering not just to this committee, but also on our annual plan and then later for the annual report. So acknowledge that workload and thank you for it. Kia ora. Councillor Bitter.
Thank you, Chair. I want to highlight the graphs on page 53 and 54 because it's pertinent to item 8, which we'll be discussing next. So I'll cover them now because the graphs are in this part of the agenda. So we have a very nice looking graph showing a big reduction in net debt. Now, that is of course due to the transfer of debt to Three Waters. The balancing the books debt, we see that in the year 33-34, the surplus is going to be a bit less than half what was projected in the LTP, and that's our ability to repay the debt. So even though our debt is going down, our income is also going down as a result, and our ability to repay the debt is going down. Now, when I look on page 53 and see the debt to revenue, I am relieved, happy to see our debt to revenue getting down to a healthy safety margin from our 280% debt cap. So overall, very positive, and I will refer back to that when we are talking about the next item. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bitter. Any further debate, councillors? There being none, let's put the resolution, and you find that on page, oh gosh, I can't see what page it's on, sorry, colleagues. Page 47. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. And so there's a mover and a seconder. All those in favour? Against?
The motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you, colleagues. We're working along very nicely today. Let's just keep that pace up. Item number 8, the Local Government Funding Agency Bespoke Net Debt to Revenue Covenant. Again, Sarah, we bring you to the table.
Thank you,
That's page 74, colleagues.
Okay.
Sarah, table's yours.
Okay, thank you. So this paper has been provided as an update on previous discussions regarding the LGFA creating the opportunity for growth councils to apply for the 350% debt revenue covenant, and Hamilton City Council is an eligible growth council for this. But following the decision to create the CCO and transfer the debt to the CCO, which has a 500% debt to revenue limit, it's freed up significant debt ceiling, and we've considered the debt to revenue ratios going forward with the annual plan sitting at 239%, 191 million headroom. So there's recommendation to maintain the current debt to revenue ceiling of 280% at this time. So I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Did you have any, and seconded by Councillor Emma? Are there any questions, colleagues? I had a couple, Sarah, just with regard to should we go ahead with the increase? There's a suggestion there that it would cost something. Is there an application fee or some kind of assessment that's needed and we would have to cover that?
I have not got the details of that. Gary seems to.
So I think what we're focusing on is there is additional compliance activity to be done. So we would have to do some additional reporting, etc. So it would increase the capacity we need to comply with that.
Okay, so rather than being a fee, it would be extra work behind the scenes.
Yeah, I'd have to go back. I'm trying to think whether there is a basis point adjustment, but I think it's marginal. It's not significant enough to have any real concern.
And my second question is that I recall in previous meetings, Andrew Mickle from our GFA making a comment that should we, in the instance of some kind of catastrophe, need to call on our GFA to give us some additional headroom for instances like that, we would be able to do that without too much stress.
Yes, that's my understanding.
So to be available to us. And also that we have, I don't know, almost a little credit card that we can...
Yeah, we do have an additional facility that we can draw on as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, those are my questions. Any others elsewhere? No, there being none, let's go to debate. Councillor Wilson, did you wish to debate? No debate. Seconder? Very well, then let's go to... Oh, I can't... Andrew, if you could move your drink bottle, I can't see... Thank you. Now I can see your light. Sorry about that. Councillor Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. If I recall correctly, when the LGFA was set up in 2012, the debt to revenue ratio then, which was thought appropriate for council needs, was 100%. Every couple of years it creeps up, 120, 150, 180, 200, I recall these figures, then 210, 250, 280, and now we'll talk about 350. I reflect on the reason why it started off at 100%, because that was thought that that was manageable for councils, and that more than that would be putting councils into long-term difficulty. I very strongly support the staff motion in this report of not increasing it to 350%. I, as usual, amount for the council to get into further debt. Thank you, Gary and Sarah, for this report.
Thank you, colleagues. There's debate from Councillor Sarah online.
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, I also support us retaining our current debt headroom and not applying for further room. Waters is sorting out our water infrastructure is the biggest pressure that we have in terms of both catching up on the growth that's already happened and providing for growth that's coming, and we're already making the move to put our water services into a CCO. So I don't see that there's a need at this stage to be increasing our debt headroom. And so, yeah, I think it's a prudent decision at this stage to keep it as it is. And we've already provided sufficient headroom for dealing with the challenges that we have with water infrastructure through the CCO.
Thank you, Councillor Sarah. And I guess just a couple of comments from me as we kind of finish with this debate. I think to raise your debt to revenue ratio, you must have be doing some really serious and careful consideration and a thorough exploration into the risks and the benefits for us. And it's something that Council may have needed to consider more seriously if we were not to proceed with the waters reform. And early analysis made it clear that without the reform, we would have faced significant challenges in supporting growth in our city. And, we know that for the second year in a row, we're the fastest growing city in the country. And, gosh, if we had $1 for every time we'd heard that in this council, boy, we'd be totally in the black. However, look, the situation's changed and we just no longer require that additional debt headroom. And you can see on page 54 of the Financial Performance and Strategy report that gives a really clear picture of what what those future projections are. And so given that, I'm in support of this recommendation also. And we should go to the vote. So I guess just a hands up, all those in favour? Against?
The motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you, colleagues. Item number 11. No, 9, beg your pardon. Item number 9, the Ratepayer Assistance Scheme. Who's presenting that for us today? That's you, Gary, I see.
That's me. So the paper's presented with, I hope you can see quite a lot of detail in terms of structure and information. In terms of the Ratepayer Assistance Scheme and where we are, I see it as essentially having 5 different kind of phases, and at the moment I think we're between or shifting into phase 2. So phase 1 was the original investigation into the scheme, and Hamilton City Council supported the work that was done to get to this point with a number of other councils. Phase 2, as it proceeds, if it gets the funding identified from councils identified at 2.5 million in total, would be the phase to develop the product and define the components of it and establishment and a complete business case. If that results in a go-ahead decision, then phase 3 is obviously the commencement, which would require an equity setup, which is still an investment to enable the RAS to proceed. Phase 4 would be the period of time where the RAS will probably have greater costs than revenue for a period which has been identified. That's part of what that equity is to support. And obviously phase 5 is identified once the RAS gets to scale. It has been identified that it would not only cover its cost, but would start providing a payback initially to offset the original position to get to break even, and then long term provide return to those investors and councils who invested in order to offset future costs. The recommendations are designed particularly around identifying on page 77, under B1, an amount for the council to invest to enable into the 2.5 to enable the RAS to proceed with the development phase of the project, phase 2. An indication from council under B2 on whether it is would indicatively be prepared to participate in the equity component if we go live. That is not a commitment to do that. That is simply an indication that, in principle, yes, we believe, but it would still be subject to approval at a later point in time. And B3 is an indication of the council's willingness to participate in the RAS as a council offering to ratepayers and developers if it goes ahead. So that doesn't require any investment. If the RAS went ahead and we didn't add any additional investment, we would still be able to participate in the Ratepayer Assistance Scheme and offer that to the community if it goes ahead. we simply would not have an investment component, and clearly there's a risk of not having funding to achieve the development may lessen the chance that it does go ahead. Happy to take any questions.
I've got online Councillor Maria.
Kia ora, tēnā koutou. Kia ora, Gary. Whakapapa, my question is, where will the 500k come from?
So the 500k is essentially managed through our treasury and ultimately debt funded for a period of time.
Okay, should we get to the establishment point, how much of the 30 million will we be expected to pay?
The maximum is 20%, so there's a structure where they, to make it effective in terms of efficiency, limit any one council to having up to 20%, but there is no defined minimum. So you could choose at that point which percentage you'd like to go up to 20% if you proceed.
Okay. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Maria. Councillor Pike.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, my first question, Councillor Maria has asked, but for the second part, is there any indication of the type of individuals this program would assist? I mean, we have the rates rebates for council and for central government. Would this scheme be targeting the same people or different people? Is there any early indication of that?
So defining who it would target would be part of the component development. I think the early indication, and we've commented in the paper, breaking it into 3 different kind of product offerings. One is the ability to leverage equity in an environment where you're not income rich, but you have equity support. That overseas has predominantly been targeted at superannuitants to ensure they can stay within their home for longer while still paying the property rates that are associated with it and not being forced to have to divest equity in their house earlier and then make payments. But I think it could be broader than that, but that's ultimately the key component of the structure is it's a cash flow postponement offset issue. The second component would be the payment of development contributions from developers, recognising that to proceed you largely have to front load the cash funding of the development contributions. This would create capacity for developers to access capital and debt for a period of time until they generate cash to pay it back. The benefit obviously is it is perceived with the structure we're able to get with Crown security funding backed through LGFA, it is expected to have a significantly lower interest rate than can be sourced. I think in that first category, definitely sourced lower than anybody who's doing a mortgage repayment settlement. In the second category, some portion of margin points better than you would get in the open market.
Thank you, that answers my question.
Councillor Bidder.
Thank you, Chair. A few questions, but I'll start with something procedural about, Chair, are we able to take item B, I, separately?
Let me just have a look what
that is approving the $500,000, so we could vote not to approve the 500k, but still indicate the others of being part of a scheme later, for instance.
Advice from you, Gary, on...
I think that would be reasonable.
Yeah. Right. So some questions. Firstly, if we go to paragraph 44, and just getting there. So that's about the shareholding for early participation in the pre-seed development, where it's being set up that there's an advantage if we join early as opposed to joining later. The question is, given there's a long period where this is probably not going to be returning any profit to the council, do you see there as being significant pressure or advantage on us to go early, or are we missing out by going later?
So I think the two different benefits. So I think the first one is the ability to influence as one of the participating councils through the steering group the structure of the schemes relative to our ratepayer base. The second benefit, I think, is within that structure in the development, it's been indicated that we would probably put in a equity structure that favoured councils that participated and took the risk of early equity investment, so that you wouldn't have joiners later on not kind of getting the advantage of not having taken the risk.
Yeah.
So it's expected that participating early would put you in a position of maximising that.
Yeah.
Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. And paragraph 47, which talks about net interest margin of approximately 1%. So I'm for a ratepayer who has the alternative of borrowing on a mortgage arrangement. Typically, would you agree that LGFA borrowing is typically about 0.5% above the OCR, and if there's a 1% margin on this, then typically mortgage rates are 2% above the OCR, so that only offers really about a 0.5% discount to ratepayers as opposed to a mortgage from the bank.
Agree relative to mortgage positions. I suppose the challenge is the ability for ratepayers who have low income to be able to actually access, because it's an income and equity basis for banks. And so therefore I think you're looking at that secondary market of, mortgage-backed repayments, which has a much higher interest rate because of that component. So I don't think it's just about the margin call. I think it's about the ability to do it in a simpler way. The process is intended to be much simpler than it would be to secure a mortgage as well.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd agree the margin is in the vicinity of 50 basis points.
Yes. Yes. And lastly, I'm surprised at the $2.5 million cost to get this set up. Is that mainly going to the consultants?
I don't have a breakdown of what it's going to, but amongst other things, we have to put together structures that propose amendments to legislation to enable it to be secured. So there will be fees to consultants and professional advisors within that.
Right. One final question. Is the government putting any money into this?
So central government have indicated support and a desire for it to proceed. They have not yet identified any commitment to either the development costs or to the equity position. LGFA has a resolution that they would participate in the equity position, given that they are going to back the funding, but structurally they can't participate in the development costs.
Yeah.
Their resolution is they have committed to an amount that only on the basis that is matched by central government. So they have identified that as a mechanism to try to identify that they believe central government, as it has participated in the LGFA itself, should also participate in this.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bidder. Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Chair. Gary, thanks for this. This council has rebate schemes in place, rates rebate schemes in place for people who are struggling to pay the rates. What level of take-up have we got of our rates rebates schemes?
I don't have that information. I'll reach out to my staff and try to bring it back to you.
Oh, it'd be good to get that now. And I thought in regards to, I would have thought it's pretty relevant to what we're doing, the level of need in the community. Because it sort of goes to my question out of that is, this is a new concept for people. And I'm interested in what level of need there is and what level of take-up we can expect from the community.
So the identification of participation has primarily been indicated by similar schemes that exist within Canada and Australia, and they have they are predominantly limited to superannuitant equivalents within those schemes, so they are quite restricted, but they have fairly high participation rates.
Yes.
I don't know the ratio, but in terms of this, ensuring you have the scale to have an effective structure and situation put in place, there's an expectation that those ratios would be achieved.
Yeah, it's a different country, different cultures.
Yep, agreed.
But our rates rebates are not taken up to any great degree, are they?
I'll ask Sarah to come forward while we've been talking. She's probably been investigating the number.
206,000.
$306,000
Right.
dollars. And there's two different schemes, Sarah. One which is refunded by government, and the second which is a council rates rebate, but also has the additional requirement to your investment holdings. So if and to the ownership. So my understanding is that if you have assets over the value of $30,000 in terms of cash assets, then your ability to be able to apply for that second council rebate is extinguished.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have a breakdown of what
Each of them is?
what each of those items is separately. Yeah.
Can I just say you also need to look at the other two products that Gary was talking about? And I know that goes on beyond helping the average ratepayer and that sort of thing, but
The DCs?
around the DCs, and obviously with being a growth council, and we've had some feedback from developers around DCs and that sort of thing.
Yep.
When you get into the detail of the scheme, my personal view would be it would help developers actually around the development contributions. And the other thing is if there's a levy on the property that the developer sells to a person, then the RAS scheme people actually manage that, not council. So there's less administrative cost for council on that part of the new product.
Right, thank you. All right, I guess my concern is about the level of take-up and the concept of putting it against your own house and how new that is for us as a culture. In terms of on point 49 on page 83, it talks about the analysis suggesting that it indicates break even after 3 years, initial equity fully paid back after 8 years. I guess I'm just questioning that, those figures. What has been the experience in other countries in terms of how quickly that has happened? And Gary, how would you see that in terms of the New Zealand culture, given that this is a new concept here? Do you think that's overly optimistic?
I don't believe so, but I think it would be one of the key bits to be fleshed out in the business case. But I don't see it as being such a significant risk that it automatically would assume that the business case wouldn't suggest the take-up would be sufficient. There's information provided in the attachment around that.
Okay. All right, no, that's me, thank you.
Sorry, one other comment would be the take-up issue. One of the most significant impacts that came out of the British Columbia experience is when they were able to move it from paper forms that ratepayers had to fill in detail and provide to an online simplified system, that increased take-up quite significantly. So the fact that there's an intent to make sure that the process is as simple as possible, is online and you know, automated as it possibly can be, not totally, but possibly can be, I think that increases the take-up.
Right, okay. Sorry, just one last question, just related to my first question in terms of the 306,000 take-up for rates rebates. I mean, would that type of take-up how would that equate to what we're doing here in terms of, I'm just trying to understand how, you know, what portion of ratepayers, I guess I'm trying to equate that sort of take-up, because you'll get, what worries me is that people won't actually respond to this, you know. It sounds a great idea, but it's a new concept. So I'm just trying to understand a rates rebate, which has been around for years and years and years, and people understand it, I think, of take-up of 306,000. How does that equate to what you'd be hoping for here? It's pretty small.
Haven't got breakdown by council, and obviously it's going to be the number of councils that participate, but I think you in your role will have experienced talking to councillors in other areas that there are challenges across the rate base, and each one is different. Obviously the government, as Councillor Maxine indicated, the government scheme and the Hamilton City Council is particularly restricted based on level of asset, and so that is significantly capping participation in those.
Right.
So I do think that because this is equity, not income based, I think the take-up would be reasonable. You know, anecdotally, I'm sure you have had, and I know I have seen letters from ratepayers concerned that although they've been in their house for a long period of time, in order to pay their rates, because they can't access all of the ratepayer, they are having to consider selling and leave their house, even though they have equity in the house.
Okay.
Because they don't have the income to support for a period of time, for the remainder that they can stay in their house, those rate payments.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your Chair. It's a genuine question. So you're really saying that it could actually appeal to people who aren't helped by the rebate scheme?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
And
Thanks.
also, Councillor, recognising that the 24-25 rebate, according to the interweb, is $790, and it's barely a third of what our average rates are, and what this scheme would allow would be the full value. So I guess that's a significant thing. But good to know that superannuitants are connected to the web, and when those online opportunities have been offered, have boosted numbers. So good to see that that's already happening. I've got some further questions, one from Councillor Sarah online, and then to Councillor Wilson. Councillor Sarah.
Thank you, Max. Chair Maxine, and thanks, Gary. I was just interested, currently is it right that we currently allow people to defer rate payments, but it's up to a maximum of 5 years, and so it's not really been taken up?
Yeah, there's also additional conditions within the policy around that in terms of demonstrating hardship and the controls in hardship. So, yes, you're correct, but I also think you've got to look at what the structure of that postponement policy looks like. And I think the challenge...
Yeah, so
obviously,
this will have a lot less of the those hoops to jump through for people.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And obviously the challenge with postponement, although technically you'd still get settlement on the sale of a property at the end of the cycle, is councillors having to carry the cash burden of not having collected the money, and therefore there is a cost associated with that. Under this scheme, council would not carry the cash burden.
And with the thank you. That's and with the risk around putting the seed funding in, and how, given that it is subject, us agreeing to put this in is subject to other councils also putting it in seed funding to meet at least 2.5 million. Like, what is the risk here of this not going ahead and us not getting that seed funding back?
I may have to come back and talk about the resolution piece for this. The intent would be not to pass the funds over, even if we passed the resolution, until the 2.5 million has been secured. So essentially you've got a number of councils, and Auckland has done this and Tauranga have done this already. So both of those councils have already committed $500,000 each to the 2.5, but they are both have resolved not to make that payment until the RAS can go out and say, I've got these councils, they've all made commitments, all of the commitments exceed or are up to 2.5. So you wouldn't be passing the funds across until you had security that the full 2.5 was committed across councils in New Zealand.
And are we able, in terms of that overall cost, is it that it will actually cost $2.5 million to set up?
It's an estimated cost. I know that they have included contingency within it, so it may be less, at which point we would talk about, is that then refunded to those participating councils as a ratio, or is it transferred into the go forward equity position?
And how would, I saw in the report that it was talking about favourable conditions for those who put in seed funding to encourage or to provide, yes, some reward for taking on that risk. And it talked about 2 shares for $1 invested in that seed funding. How would that be possible? So that would just basically, we would have a higher level of ownership within this structure.
Yeah, so and it's a simplistic example. It's probably overly simplified to a certain extent. But even this 500,000 committed at this point, if the RAS goes ahead, that would be essentially 500,000 of equity. But if another council post the commencement of the RAS was to participate and they put in 500,000, they would only get half of the equity that Hamilton City has for its 500.
Okay, thank you. And it talked about Auckland and Tauranga. Which other councils, are you aware of other councils at this stage, or is there value in our council having a discussion with others to understand where they're at?
I have been having conversations with colleagues around this throughout the country. I would not want to comment on which ones may or may not proceed until they have papers in the public record. But I do believe there is enough support for it across both the originally participating set of councils and some additional ones who have indicated an interest in participating in the development that there will be sufficient councils to meet the 2.5.
Okay, and just coming back to the risk, so there's like what could potentially be a reason for money being spent on setting this up and then it not actually coming to fruition?
I think you've got, I'm trying to work through, because it's future risk, right? So you've got risk of change in central government direction, because this is currently supported by the minister as in a scheme that they believe would be beneficial. but it does require legislative change to make it effective. That would probably be the most complex aspect. The other area that I can imagine would be if additional work on the uptake issues, as identified by Councillor Taylor, indicated the uptake rates would be lower than expected. That may mean that the payback period is longer and therefore may not be viable for councils.
And that, thanks, Gary, and that risk around change in central government direction. So how long do you, I mean, would this likely have to cross over two governments into the, you know, given the time that it takes to make legislative changes?
Based on timelines indicated, we do not believe so.
Okay, and why is central government not paying for the cost of drafting and working through these law changes?
They would obviously participate in their role within those law changes,
Yeah.
but there would need to be some structural advice to the RAS about what that looks like to make sure it's effective. And beyond that, in terms of not contributing at the outset to development, you know, obviously I can't kind of speak more broadly to central government's position on that.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Councillor Sarah. Gary, you mentioned, just before I go, I'm sorry, Councillor Ewan, your questions. No, you go. No, you've been really quiet and I really do want to give the question to you. Gary, there was some comment that you made, and Tauranga and Auckland have both suggested that they wouldn't put in the funding until the whole was, the whole $2.5 million was achieved. But that isn't mentioned in your recommendation.
Actually, and I'm going back through it again, it actually is.
Was that your question also? Huh?
It was actually going to
Point that out.
try to move an amendment to reflect that was part of my sequence.
Perfect.
So
we're
what
on alignment on that. Then.
So what I would,
Yeah.
sorry, what I would point out, screen going black, B1 says that it's a recommendation to proceed with the investment subject to total development funding of 2.5 million is committed from other local authorities. So there is already a recognition that is within that recommendation already.
Oh, very good. Thank you.
Sorry.
Shows we should all read it properly then.
So a loan-funded investment to support further development, subject to total development funding of 2.5 million, is committed from other local authorities and or central government. So it that's the part of the recommendation that says the money will not be passed to the RAS until the RAS can demonstrate that they've got up to 2.5 committed via resolution by councils.
Perfect. That's what I wanted it to say. So is that your intention too, Councillor Wilson?
It's a very poorly structured sentence because in theory it says other local authorities, implying that it's not Hamilton, but then it in brackets says including Hamilton. So the 2.5 is including the 500,000.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. That would be ideal. I've got a series of questions, although Sarah was able to ask most of them. I just want to, on 57, on the item 57, it's just a confirmation that ultimately, if we do release the seed fund of 500,000 and it doesn't proceed, the money's lost. Is that your interpretation?
Yes.
Right.
If it's utilised. Presumably, if at some point, partway through that process, they identified it wouldn't proceed and they hadn't utilised all of the funds, then any excess would be returned to councils. But ultimately, I think you need to consider that the material risk is the 500,000.
Okay, so subsequent to that, does the motion actually provide us that absolute certainty? So the way it's worded currently, if the other councils put in the 2.5 million, and then subsequently another reason is landed on for why they're not going to proceed, we've lost our 500,000.
Yes. Presumably, it's all been consumed. The one caveat I would have is, yes, that's the maximum of your risk is 500. My expectation would be if there was some kind of discovery partway through the process, let's say only half of the 2.5 had been consumed, and there was an indication to not proceed with the RAS, then I would expect we would have structures prior to passing this money across that any excess be returned to the councils as a ratio of their investment in the 2.5.
All right. Help me understand from a governance point of view, in that early iteration of having received the 2.5 million from the seed funding shareholders, well, I mean, are they shareholders from the moment we invest the seed funding?
No, they're not.
Right. So we're not shareholders. Do we have any governance influence on the decision-making process at that infancy stage?
Yes, it is expected that the participating councils would be able to identify participants in the steering group, which would govern that process, which would be intended to be a combination of LGFA, LGNZ, staff supporting it, and appointees from council. Similar to the fact, well, I mean, in structure, there is a shareholders' council sitting behind the LGFA, which we participate in. There would be a steering group over this prior to commencement, and that's where we've talked about the ability to influence, would be through that steering group. We may have someone directly appointed from that group of people. I don't imagine every council individually would have someone, so we would probably be looking to look at the skills across the council staff who could contribute to it.
The report is quite comprehensive. Just clarify for me, if we choose not to proceed with the seed funding first step, if we want our ratepayers to be able to participate, we at some stage just do need an equity stake, or can we in fact not be an equity participant?
That detail has not been specifically defined yet. I'm sure it would come out of the detail of it, but my current expectation is that councils would not have to make an equity contribution in order to be able to access the RAS. Actually, no, I'll take that back. I know that as a fact. It's stated in some of the supporting documents. So if you don't invest, the council would still be, if it does proceed, the council would still be able to proceed as a participant in the RAS, offering the schemes to their community without necessarily holding equity.
So the only advantage for us being a shareholder, we know the risks, but the advantage is we could glean a return on the basis of ratepayers throughout the country finding themselves in difficult financial circumstances and having to borrow to cover the rates. We'll get a return on that investment.
That's what's been indicated in the scheme, yes.
Thank you.
What I would say is, if I look at some of the externals, one of the definitions would be, and I think it's commented in the paper, the development of the scheme would have to indicate, for example, does that return get reinvested or does it reduce the margin offered, right? So there's risk in that process. So that specific process has not been defined.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. That's the end of your questions?
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Casey Cox.
Thank you. Just a question. One of the advantages of being an early investor or putting the 500,000 in would be that we get to participate in the shaping of the scheme. Is that one of the advantages?
Yes.
So, just a question in relation to, I guess, the shaping of it. So my understanding of the British Columbia scheme is that there is some criticism around the uptake of the rates deferral, primarily benefiting more wealthy residents. So I assume that in the development we could promote values of equity or access if we were at the table.
Within the structure of the scheme, absolutely. I would say that this is supplemental to the rebate scheme, and therefore it is interpretation of wealth. It is primarily focused on an equity position. So recognising that the participants would have to have a certain level of equity within property to be able to participate in the scheme.
Okay. And then I guess as a follow-on from that, there's no reason why, for example, a community housing provider with a rental portfolio couldn't then participate in the program as a ratepayer?
That level of detail has not been defined. That's the type of discussion I think we're talking about through the steering committee being able to define in more detail.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bitter.
Thank you, Chair. Gary, so if in the future the scheme's going well and we're putting equity into it, is it guaranteed that that equity would be going into our community, or is it available across New Zealand?
It would be available across New Zealand.
Yep, thank you.
Councillor Wilson, you've got a further question?
Subsequent question regarding the steering committee. I just want to get my head around exactly who they are, how they report back to the original seed funding investors, and how we feed back to them the broader scope of their policies.
So, not detailed, but my expectation in terms of what's been described, and I don't have the background to the history of this, maybe one of the other GMs might. There was a steering committee over phase one. We have discussed this within the Shareholder Council of LGFA in two components. One, the relationship of LGFA from a Shareholders Committee council there, but two, the majority of those councils that are on the Shareholder Committee are also the ones who are indicating participation. We expect it would be a steering committee made up of those participants who are identified already within this document, and some ratio of council staff with appropriate knowledge as per the Shareholder Committee for LGFA. So I'm kind of going, if you had 10 councils, let's say, who put in seed funding, I would not expect that there would be 10 staff appointed from each of those, one from each of those councils on that steering committee. It would become ineffective, unwieldy. So we would go through a process as we have with LGFA's Shareholder Committee to identify the staff who we think have the best skills, and then we would put in a structure where we are engaging through our staff to them, participating in feedback through the council appointees on that steering committee, providing our perspective on that. I do think there's recognition that even if you put in seed funding as a proportion, you won't be able to say, I want it to be this, right? It's the ability to influence as a pool of seed funders.
That last point's very helpful.
Thank you. I think that's the end of questions. I just had a question around the timeframes, Gary. Maybe I've missed it in the report, but after the seed funding for the business case, what kind of timeframe is there expected for the outcomes to be delivered?
Still to be defined. I think the early indication would be towards the end of this calendar year. How that would then align to the legislation change and therefore the timing of the establishment. So between doing the development, making the decision to proceed is intended to be around about December this year or early next year. You would then have to, after going live, you would have to do the work to develop the IT stack to make it easy for people to process, which is what some of the equity goes to, setting up the framework for the shareholding. So it may be, you know, July 26 or July 27 that you would have this coming on board, I would imagine. Optimistically, July 26, probably more realistically, July 27, I would think.
And would it be your expectation that the business case or the board, or the, what are they calling themselves, the governance group, would they also then be speaking to the whole of the political spectrum in terms of support for, you know, for this business case, should it get to that level?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, cool. And final question, just with regard to the LGFA and its inception, was government a party to the business case at that level, do you know?
I might look to one of my colleagues because I think I know the answer, but I'm not 100% sure. So.
Sorry, what was the question? I was not...
It was with regard to the establishment of the LGFA and its inception. I know that government is a party to it now, but was it at the outset when there was a business case developed?
It was following exactly the same path as we are with this particular item. They were around the table, they were providing significant staff support, legislative support, but they weren't a funder until the stage, the latter stage that Gary has referred to under the scheme. So exactly the same approach. In fact, I would say that this approach is almost modelling the LGFA inception.
Right, and that in terms of being able to stand up or to get funding or support, it's a usual practice to have a business case to support all of the assumptions that are coming out of that, rather than to expect, you know, everybody all in.
That's correct. So that was exactly the process for the LGFA. There was a core group of councils who provided some initial seed funding. In line with Councillor Wilson's question, that initial funding was at risk, but it ultimately, as it progressed, formed part of the capital. That seed funding enabled the business case to be developed in stages, and there were stage gates. And ultimately, the late stage gate was when all the shareholders came on board, including the government. So the same approach has been, I guess, reflected here in terms of, as Gary referred to, there was some initial, very small amount of money that a few councils, including Hamilton, put into this pre-COVID. I think it was 2020, 2021 sort of time frame. We're now at the next stage where the detailed business case work is the next piece of work, and that's the next stage gate.
Thank you for that reminder. As I recall, was it Christchurch and Wellington that were also in a party to that initial investigation? And we'd spent around $70,000, as I understand.
Yes, Auckland, Hamilton, Tauranga, Wellington, Christchurch, I think were the councils that I recall.
Okay. Thank you. That's all of my questions, certainly.
I've got a follow-up from that.
Yep.
Blair, I think you said the exposure was 70,000 last time. Is that correct?
Approximately, yes.
So this is considerably more.
So that was money that we've spent on the scheme to date a number of years ago on the very early work of this particular scheme.
And what returns have we gleaned from that investment?
It wasn't an investment, it was it was effectively some money to support some early investigations, which has led to ultimately the work which is presented today.
So is the proposal here today that is very different? This is an investment.
Sorry, Councillor, I think we're confusing. Your question is about our investment in LGFA,
Yes.
right? Not our initial investment in the scheme to date.
Correct.
Okay.
So do you want to answer it, or do you want to let Blair answer it?
So the structure was the same in terms of the amount invested was at risk and then converted to equity. I, again, am probably looking to my colleague at the back of the room to see if she has any insight on how we would describe the equity benefit pass-through. Normally, actually, I can do it. With the LGFA, that return is normally passed through in a reduction in the interest rate that's available to councils, rather than as a dividend specifically back.
And what you're and just to remove any ambiguity, what you're saying in this particular proposal, and it's just a proposal in terms of the steering committee, what they may land on, it could either be a return back to the shareholders, or it could be cheaper rates offered to the ratepayer who borrows.
Those are the two, 80-20 kind of scenarios that I could see being most likely.
Okay.
One or the other, or a mix of the two.
Combination. All right. Madam Chair, just one procedural question to you. The staff recommendation on 77, that hasn't been moved or has so far? No.
No, it has not.
Okay. Can I just have clarity from Councillor Bidder? The idea of moving part by part, if you don't move I, I'm just trying to work out how the rest of it, you keep the rest of it in.
Right. So
my question is it better to have an amendment that says we're not participating in the seeding round and reserving our options for later?
Gary, have we got that type of a thing captured up in your other options?
No, I think that the challenge that Councillor Wilson's describing is probably the interplay between point B1 and point B2. I do think you could pass point B3 separately. You could do point B1 and B2 separately. The one comment I would say is we don't currently know what restrictions there may be in participating in equity under point B2, depending on B1. So there's a relationship, it's not defined, it's not established, I can't comment to it, but there may be.
But if I could, Madam Chair, but Gary, isn't that true of everything? We're not quite sure. I mean, there are currently, the steering committees haven't landed on anything.
No, because part of this process is to go through the development, to do all of those steps to get to the point of a go, no go. You have to do the work to be able to make the decision, and you need investment to do the work.
I get it.
A leap of faith, Councillor.
A 2.5 million leap of faith. A whole lot more than it cost us to set up LGFA.
Thank you. Are there any further questions, councillors?
Well, I'm still not sure how you want us to, if we need an amendment, if we were inclined to say we don't want to be involved in the first capital raising round, the seed funding.
Yeah, we'll vote on it point by point, I think, at this stage and see where we are. I'm, in that instance, happy to be the mover. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Anna Casey-Cox. Right, let's go to the debate then, shall we? look, I'm in support of the seed funding for this rates assistance scheme and progressing it to the full business case, because it's not until we have the facts of the full business case that we know what other options are available to us. I think it's not that it's speculative spending. I think it's really targeted and early stage investment to develop the practical tool that can help address both housing affordability, infrastructure barriers that we know we have in our city, and I believe that there is the interest in it from some of our superannuitant ratepayers that, despite the fact that we're a different country and culture, I think that we do have some of the same kinds of issues, and we've been hearing them. So I think Hamilton has been in this right from the very beginning, and rightly so, shaping the idea alongside those other councils that we've already identified. And by co-investing now, we maintain our leadership and improve the chance of securing the full $2.5 million, and in that partner funding. It's a scheme that's not, as some might have suggested, a reverse mortgage. It's about offering smarter and much more flexible ways for those eligible ratepayers, like pensioners and, in fact, first home buyers. And it offers them the opportunity to front costs, such as the rates and those development contributions that we know are a real barrier in some areas. And banks simply are not filling those gaps. And in fact, if you think as a superannuitant, you can go to your bank and raise money, you've got another thing to think about, actually. It's not easy, and it won't be. So we need to find systems that are much easier to use, and I believe that that business case will identify them, and it's something that as a city we should be supporting. Kia ora. I've got a full board, and I'm not sure what order the online folk came in, so I'm going to rely on Kieran to give me that, or I might just put you in amongst the people on the board. So I'll go to Councillor Bidder.
This is a clever scheme to treat a problematic symptom. So I do have respect for the scheme, but I would proceed with caution, which means not including B1, the investment upfront of $500,000. I'd rather take a wait-and-see approach. The reason for this is I have spoken to Grey Power about this. Pensioners who have limited and fixed incomes and are already struggling are really one of the target markets for this scheme. And this has the effect of a reverse mortgage, which reverse mortgages have a bad reputation in New Zealand. And I was surprised at the strong resistance from the Grey Power members because of that. I'm not sure that's entirely well founded, because reverse mortgages are typically 4% above the floating rate, and we're looking at a 0.5% discount. So I can see advantages, but the success of the scheme depends on a sufficient take-up rate, and I am not confident at this point that we will get that from the pensioners. I've also spoken to developers, and it is also, in my initial thought, a good scheme for developers, because they typically pay 8 to 10% premium above the floating rate for development borrowing. So this is potentially good for them. But the response was that there would also be a fairly low uptake rate on it. The concern from both pensioners and developers was that while this might be treating the symptom, it runs the risk of exacerbating the problem by allowing council to continue with higher expenses. And finally, this money we put in the future is not guaranteed to go to our community. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. And now I have my speaking list. Councillor Maria on online.
Kia ora no tātou. I currently do not support the ratepayer assistance scheme because its main purpose is to provide relief for asset-rich ratepayers and developers, not those genuinely in financial hardship. Let's be clear, the scheme disproportionately benefits those who already hold significant property wealth. Developers with multiple properties and high-value landowners can access assistance, while everyday Hamiltonians, especially renters, low-income families and young people are left out. That is not equity, that is not fairness. Yes, we must care for our elderly residents, many of whom are asset-rich but income poor, living on pensions and struggling to meet rising living costs. But there are better ways to support them. Targeted rates deferral schemes with clear hardship criteria, expanded rates rebates for low or fixed income earners, home maintenance support and free financial advice services, wraparound social supports through local community partnerships. At the same time, let's not forget our first home buyers who face skyrocketing housing prices, increasing rates and shrinking opportunities. We should be investing in affordable housing developments led by council and iwi partnerships, first home buyer grants and incentives, reduce consenting and development fees for projects focused on affordability, not profit. We need to stop using ratepayer money to subsidise wealth. Let's refocus our efforts on those who actually need support, our kaumātua, our rangatahi young people, and the working families who are the backbone of Hamilton Kirikiriroa. Fairness means lifting people up, not patting the pockets of those already at the top. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Maria. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Chair. I've listened really carefully to the questions and answers and really appreciate my colleagues' questions on this. Look, as an early step, I'm supportive of this. We have talked for some time around the council chamber the fact that local government needs more tools in the toolbox for funding and financing, and that doesn't stop just at council's tools. But I also see more with this scheme than simply the rate payers or deferring their rates or for developers. The government had a very highly successful insulation and heating program, and that I think their target was around 25,000 installs for the year, and they did 38,000 installations. So I think that the gold might be in that particular part of the scheme, and those looking for property improvement loans for home EV chargers, for insulation, for solar panels. Look, I might be wrong, I don't know. But as I said, it's more about funding and financing tools, not just for councils, but for the residents as well. And look, it doesn't come without a risk if it doesn't proceed to the next step. And I'm not saying that this will gain my full support for the next step, but I think it is innovative and it's certainly worth continuing to that next step. So at this time, I will be supporting however you decide to chop this up. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Taylor.
I'm probably not going to support this, or I might support B3. I can see what the scheme's trying to do, and I can see some advantages, possibly the DC funding, but I have two issues. For one, I'm not keen to part or to borrow another $500,000, and probably a couple million more at some point that will be asked to put in. I think we need to start drawing the line with such spending at the moment. But also, I'm just uneasy about this. Philosophically, I've got a problem with it. It's different from the LGFA, which was giving councils the ability to borrow at lower interest rates. Here, we're creating a mechanism where residents can borrow because they can't pay their rates, which we've generated. They may be borrowing at a slightly lower rate, but they're still having to borrow to pay their rates. Let's not pretend that's a good thing. There's nothing good about it. I'm concerned enough about the lack of urgency in terms of local government around the country and this council restraining spending over the last 3 to 6 years without giving elected members any more encouragement to carry on that behaviour. We need to keep our feet on the throat of spending. We need to take the responsibility, not be leaving it to residents to borrow against their homes to pay for the costs that we have generated. I think our first and only priority is to get our books in order and to restrain our spending. If we do that successfully, and we've got a rates rebate scheme, then we don't need a scheme like this. So I'm uneasy with it, I don't feel right about it, and I'm not going to support it.
Thank you. Councillor Pike.
Yeah. And I want to thank everyone for their work on pulling this together and for the workshop they led on for elected members too. I do acknowledge of the merit of what the RAS is trying to achieve. There are people in our city facing real financial hardship, and councillors all want to support those doing it tough. Creating a national framework to help those struggling to pay their rates is a conversation worth having. Although I will say the biggest story here is that rates are now so high that we are now talking about having to take loans out to pay them. But while I support the overall idea and principle, I don't believe committing $500,000, especially as borrowed funds to be part of a steering group, is the right step for Hamilton right now. This $500,000 won't go directly to any residents in needs and doesn't preclude residents from applying in the future. It would simply go towards developing the structure, governance and delivery model for a scheme that's still in its early stages. That said, this isn't a closed door. We can and should reassess once a scheme is fully formed, when we have clearer information and whether it aligns with the needs of Hamilton ratepayers who will, regardless of the decision today, still be eligible to apply. In the meantime, we already have central governments and councils' rates rebates program to support our most vulnerable ratepayers. Let's strengthen and promote those current frameworks instead, while staying focused on the bigger picture, how we can reduce debt so ultimately we can make rates more affordable for everyone. So I won't be supporting the $500,000, but support the B3 of the motion today.
Thank you. Councillor Casey Cox.
Yeah, I'll be supporting the motion and the what I consider to be an investment. I agree that there are some things that need to be worked out to ensure that this scheme does provide adequate benefit, particularly to our fixed income house owners. That's a very important aspect of it, and I think that through being an early investor, we have the opportunity to shape it. And I think, you know, we're going to have very good people around the table to enable those outcomes. I also think we're definitely not alone, like the other bigger metros will be going with us, otherwise it won't go ahead. So I think there's some real security in that. In terms of the property improvement, one of the things that excites me about it is the ability for the scheme to enable investment in solar and other such things that will actually have a good impact on our emissions as a city, which I think is a critically important aspect of it and probably something we haven't really talked about. I also, just the DC deferrals in terms of enabling developers to get going. I'm particularly thinking about the developers that are committed to delivering affordable housing and what that may mean, because they tend to be developers who struggle to have the cash flow required. So this scheme will help to support, I believe, that kind of development in our city, which ultimately will benefit people who are on lower income. So there's a lot of potential positives in it, and I think that, again, the risks are measured because we're not going alone, and we're going to have other big metros with us, which provides some security. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I've often spoken in this chamber over the last 3 years of our addiction to spending. And in some ways, what's in front of us today is a little perverse. We need to focus on our core role. We're not in the business of gleaming a return on our poor ratepayers who are having to borrow to pay the rates that we've set. The best way to help the ratepayers is to stop spending money on low priority, nice to have projects. That's how you help our ratepayers. That's how you help our ratepayers, is you stick at the core of our role. And we're not a bank. And people talk about the opportunity that we could get in at the coalface, we could influence how this could work. In fact, we've been told we'll have very little influence in setting the core parameters of this entity, and we're risking $500,000. It's a gamble. Are we not better to wait? Are we not better to wait and see if a system is put together? And we've heard our ratepayers could apply for it. They could apply whether we're an equity partner or not. There's so much ambiguity, we're not quite sure for taking our risk whether or not we're actually going to get a return, because we're not sure, nor can we actually influence what the rules will be. There's some suggestion, oh, this will help low-income and affordable housing projects. There's no indication that that could be part of the rules. We're better to wait. And while we're waiting, we're better to remind ourselves our key role is funding priority areas, not nice-to-haves.
Thank you. Councillor Sarah. You're on mute, Councillor.
Cool. I think it's a lost opportunity today to not support this going ahead. We are the fourth largest city. This has been an initiative driven by the large cities in New Zealand, and to have Hamilton not support this at the outset, I think is really unhelpful and could put off others also getting this established. So by not supporting it now, we put the whole thing at risk, and we're at risk of leaving residents with one less choice when it comes to how they pay their rates. I don't agree that this is just for supporting wealthy people. You know, this could help someone, for example, who is on the pension, who owns a very average home in Fairfield or Norton, but is on a very fixed income, and having an additional $3,000 or so in additional cash flow could make a huge difference to their quality of life. And so I think that, and also while someone with a home could, in theory, sell their home as an option, actually I think it's good for our community and good for people to be able to stay in their home as long as possible within their own communities and neighbourhoods where they're familiar. And so this is a way of giving people that option to stay in their home as they age. And to have a better quality of life at the same time. And I hear colleagues saying, well, let's just reduce spending. Ultimately, those things that colleagues talk about being nice to have make up a very small portion of the overall budget. For example, capital program, if you look at it, it's a tiny slither that makes up investment in our community facilities. So I think that there is going to be a problem regardless. And there already is a problem in terms of people on fixed incomes being able to pay rates. So I just see this as a real lost opportunity here today, hearing elected members speaking against supporting this. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Sarah. Councillor Moko.
Tato. Hey, I've enjoyed the question time and the debates, and yeah, I'm going to be supporting this motion in its entirety. I do agree with Councillor Thompson that this is an opportunity that can be extended to a wider audience of people in our community that may need and benefit from this assistance. And so I think that we have an opportunity here right from the outset to participate in the crafting of what that scheme will look like. And I think this is an opportunity that we don't typically get with other metro councils to have that sort of role. And so, yeah, I acknowledge some of what people, a lot of what my colleagues have said. Yeah, and I think I'll just leave it there.
Thanks, Councillor Moko. And I think the final speaker, Councillor Louise, online.
Kia ora, can you guys hear me okay?
Good as gold.
Okay. If I don't sneeze or cough through this, it'll be a win for me. I just wanted to provide some really brief comments. I'm not against providing tools for the community. I'm in principle in support of this. But I do share a lot of Councillor Maria's concerns, and she summed them up really well. I've been reflecting a lot lately on how much time and energy the machine of local government puts into supporting people who already own property. And you can be on a fixed income, you can not have a lot of cash on hand, but owning property is a level of wealth accumulation that many people in our city do not have at all. So I do challenge the institution of local government and how much time and effort is spent in providing additional tools for people who own property and not thinking about the renters who are just equally a part of our city as those who own property. And so I'm going to support this today because I think people should have tools, and I think that this is a useful step. But I would also challenge, the powers of being local government, and this is also a call out for central government, to actually think about renters as well, and to put as much effort into supporting renters as we do homeowners themselves. Kia ora.
Thanks, Councillor Louise. We've just hit 11:30, and in the interest of getting to some morning tea and enjoying Lance's birthday cake, I'll forego the right of reply and we'll go straight to the vote. So we will be separating this out, and if you can put that up on the board, Ms. Ford, thank you. We will firstly vote on A, to receive the report, and I think, what do we do? Go on the board, shall we? So voting on the board, if you would. All those in favour? It's always a bit complicated when you've got online voters. Sorry, folks.
Sorry, Chair, I can't find where they hit the reaction again.
Oh, okay. Just put your hand up.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you. Now we'll go to B, that recommends that the council approves a loan-funded investment of $500,000 to support further development of the ratepayer assistance scheme, subject to the total development funding of $2.5 million is committed from local authorities. We're taking out the word other in there, and that includes Hamilton City Council and or central government. Again, to the board, and for those online, I've got Kieran here in governance assisting me, and so if you just put your hand up, thank you.
Hang on just one moment, Maths. According to my Weaver.
No. We've got Councillor Sarah, where's she? She should be further up, down. Yep, there she is.
That makes it 6 for and 5 against. So the motion is carried 6 for and 5 against.
Thank you, and we'll go to BII, an indication of additional investment at the establishment of the ratepayer assistance scheme, with the maximum investment likely to be capped at no more than 20% of any one entry to ensure off-balance treatment. To the board and those online, and just an indication with your hand.
So the motion is carried 8 for and 3 against.
Thank you. And then now to BIII, an indication of the council's willingness to use the ratepayer assistance scheme once it is established. Again, on the board.
So the motion is carried 10 for and 1 against.
And then item C in its entirety.
Oh, that's notes. We already had that. In,
We have?
that received in.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, colleagues. That's, you did that final call?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Let's now have a break for morning tea. It's pretty late and I think we're all ready for that. We'll be back at 5 to 12. Thank you. what do we need for a quorum? 2, 4, 6, 7, and we have it? And we have a quorum, so let's keep working, team. We've had a very good morning. It's my intention that we get finished prior to lunch so that you can all then be back away to your other responsibilities. And so now, bringing us back into the room, we have item 11, Water Reticulation Valuation Report. Gary, this is yours and meeting's yours.
Okay. So I'll try to capture this pretty quickly. There was extensive discussion on this issue in the approval of the annual report prior to adoption. We'll comment that relative to that, there was a request for a focus on adding additional commentary within the annual plan. That has been done and it is presented and diligent at the moment, ready for the council meeting on Thursday for adoption of the annual plan. The purpose of this paper, as we outlined then, was to come back and provide more information to councillors and insight into why we were seeing some challenges and why we think that the work needs to be done to get to a value that has more confidence. So it's really just a noting of the part of the process we've been in and part of the process of where we intend to go next.
Thank you, Gary. Councillors, do we have any questions of the report writer? No, there being none, I'm happy to move that we receive the report. Councillor Moko to second. I don't need any debate. Any debate around the room? No, there being none, let's just take the vote then. All those in favour, just raise a hand. Against?
The motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you, colleagues. That leaves item 10 to resolve to exclude the public. Councillor Anna Casey Cox to move, Councillor Taylor to second. All those in favour? Thank you. We'll give the room a couple of minutes. Oh, thank you, sorry. We'll give the room a couple of minutes to get us into public excluded. Kia ora mea Paula, acknowledge your attendance at the meeting.